My sister and I were consistently observing the same thing. Every woman who visited our neighbor appeared to be in a state of complete disbelief. We had inquiries, so we approached to introduce ourselves. From the moment he opened the door, we were aware that he was not taken aback by our presence. It was late, and I was about to ascend the stairs when I noticed something through the front window across the street. His bedroom light flickered on, and he was not alone. I halted in mid-step, with one hand still on the banister. A woman stood near the window, already halfway undressed. Her dress slipped off her shoulders, as if it had happened 100 times before. She leaned into him, placing her hands on his chest, while he stood still and calm, as if he had all the time in the world. I called out to her in a low voice, but it was imperative. She entered the room with her hair tangled in a blanket that she had retrieved from the couch. I pointed to the blanket without turning, and she sighed. He was at it again. Ava reluctantly approached me, but her eyes widened as she gazed out the window, revealing that we could see everything. Her back was against the wall, and his hand was now braced beside her head as he leaned in. No, truly. She laughed and then fell silent as he gradually raised her thigh, guiding her closer. Claire covered her mouth, and we should not be watching this. Despite this, I grinned, and we both remained motionless, pressed close to the window, like teenagers spying on something we weren't supposed to see. He moved slowly, as if he had done this 1,000 times, and her reactions didn't surprise him anymore. She clung to him, her head rolling back and her legs shaky. Before she even moved, he turned her around, and she held the window frame like it was the only thing keeping her steady. CLA shifted. Is that the same girl from last week? No, I said that's a new one. Claire shook her head, but her eyes remained fixed on the window. That's insane. I'm telling you, I whispered. They come in confidently, laughing and flirting, and they leave looking like they've just experienced something they'll never forget. We observed her tense again, her mouth dropped, her eyes fluttering, and her jaw slack. He barely moved, but whatever he was doing had her holding on like her entire body was reacting to it. Claire backed away, feeling agitated. I refrained from moving, as you cannot deny that you are a bit inquisitive. I mean, he is kind of remarkable, I said. That man is a walking mystery. She sat down on the armrest, clutching her blanket tighter. He is in his mid-50s, rarely speaks, and never boasts. Nevertheless, he has every woman in this neighborhood departing his residence as if they had just stepped out of a dream. Claire bit her tongue. I smiled, eager to learn about the experience. She laughed nervously. You're not serious, I replied. Yes, I am very serious. Not tonight, I added, but tomorrow. I may visit him, introduce myself, knock on his door, and request a sample. Perhaps I will borrow sugar, I said with a smile, or inquire if he requires assistance with a heavy object. Whatever works for you. Claire stood with her blanket still tightly clutched. I know, I said. Oh, but admit it. You are also inquiring. She did not respond. Justesse pulled the blanket tighter and looked away. The next morning I woke up with one thing still stuck in my head, him. I felt no guilt about watching him. If anything, I was more curious than ever. What was it about him that left every woman completely shaken? Claire, on the other hand, appeared to have forgotten the events of the previous night. She was still in her pajamas, curled up on the couch with a bowl of cereal, as if nothing had happened. I leaned into the doorway, arms crossed, and casually stated, I'm thinking now's a good time. She did not look up, and she sighed, bracing herself for the seriousness of the situation. Ava, she sighed. You cannot simply knock on a man's door because you liked what you saw through his window. I responded by retrieving my keys. It was not solely what I observed. It was the recurrent and consistent evidence I observed last night that cemented my conviction. Claire pulled the blanket over her head, stating, I'm not going. You don't have to do anything. Just come with me. Maybe pretend I'm borrowing something. She then looked at me, questioning why I was even there. I explained that I was walking over to prevent her from doing something too bold or pressuring her into doing something stupid. She grinned. but I could tell she was folding when she stood with her arms crossed. I tossed her a hoodie, and a few minutes later we were crossing the street. My heart thudded not from nerves, but from anticipation. CLA stayed a step behind me the whole way. I knocked once, the door creaked open. Almost immediately he stood there, barefoot, shirt halfway buttoned, hair still damp from a shower, and the way he looked at us like he already knew exactly who we were, was wondering when we'd finally meet. He looked at us like he already knew why we were there. I didn't miss the way his eyes moved just once from me to Claire, then back again, calm, measured, like he'd been waiting. "Hey," I said, keeping my voice light. "Sorry to just show up. We were out for a walk and figured might as well say hi." CLA stood just behind me, arms crossed, hoodie pulled tight like she wanted to disappear. He nodded once. "Nice of you to stop by. Where Ava and CLA?" I added, "across the street." I knew that was all he said, nothing more. However, the manner in which he said it made it clear that he did not buy our excuse and did not need to. He stepped aside and we walked into the house. The house was warm and still, filled with soft light, and the faint smell of coffee wafted from somewhere in the background. The music was playing at a slow, low volume, as if it had been on for hours. On the counter there were 2 glasses, one of which was already full. I raised an eyebrow, expecting someone to say something. He did not say anything, but I figured I might have company. I shot Celia a look. She pretended not to notice. He handed me the glass. I took it without hesitation. Claire hovered near the door, still unsure, still quiet. "You're not what I pictured," I said, taking a small sip. "Neither are you," I smirked. "And what did you picture?" His tone didn't change. "People who watch that closely usually avoid eye contact the next day." Claire flinched. "I didn't. You saw us. It's a window," he said, "not a one-way mirror." I laughed. "Quiet and sharp fare." He dropped onto the edge of the couch like it was nothing, arms resting on his knees. "Ciela still hadn't moved." "You can go anytime." "Time," he said, gently looking her way. "No pressure." She didn't answer, just stayed where she was, eyes flicking between us. I leaned on the back of the couch facing him. "You get a lot of fake excuses at your door." He looked up at me and smiled, calm and sure. "I leave the window open for a reason." I didn't back away. I approached him and leaned against him, with one leg draped across his lap and my fingers resting gently on his shoulder. He did not move. Instead, he allowed his hand to rest on my thigh, as if he had been anticipating my arrival. Claire's voice broke through the silence. "You are actually doing this?" I glanced over at her, who was still standing near the door. "You act like I dragged you here," "which you kind of did," I replied. "Simply leave or stay and admit that you are not just here for me." She shook her head. "He's a stranger, Ava number. He's the man who's had every woman in this neighborhood leaving his house like they forgot the year, including the one we watched last night." He raised his eyebrow slightly. "I try to make sure they don't forget me." Claire flinched at that, but her eyes remained fixed on him. I slowly stood up, walked over and grabbed her hand. She froze and I felt her pulse jump under my finger. "ERS," I said quietly, "you don't have to do anything. But don't lie to yourself either." I then guided her forward step by step, right in front of him. He looked up at her with a calm, unreadable expression and then leaned in and kissed her. Claire let out a shaky breath when his mouth touched hers, but after a heartbeat, she pulled back, and her face was flushed. I didn't hesitate. I stepped in, brushing past her, and kissed him with full intent, without any hesitation. I made it clear what I wanted, and his hands moved steadily to my hips. When I leaned back, neither of us said a word. I reached for the hem of my dress, and he mirrored me. We slipped out of them like it was not the first time we had done so with someone. I moved closer, my hands still resting on him. His breathing shifted, and I took my time tracking every change in his body, from the way his shoulders tightened to the slight tenseness in his grip against the cushion. I wanted to feel everything he was holding back behind me. Suddenly something changed, and he looked past me and offered a hand. Claire stood motionless, clutching her dress like a protective shield, on the brink of stepping forward or exiting. He did not utter a word. Instead, he simply nodded. CLA approached us slowly and cautiously, but she did not resist when he kissed her again. This time she did not pull away, and his hand slid behind her neck, firmly securing her. His other hand assisted in removing the dress from her shoulders, and it fell without a sound. Her breath followed, and I continued to walk, allowing the rhythm to guide me. CLA joined me on the floor, still hesitant. He guided her with a calm assurance as he touched her cheek. Our hands briefly touched, and we both remained focused on the same objective. She was more tentative and slowed down, but she was growing bolder with each movement. When his head slightly tilted back, I knew we were making progress. He then spoke in a low, steady voice, and the two of you stood together. He slid further into the couch, his arms resting wide. I climbed onto the cushions, straddling him slowly and shifting until I was exactly where I needed to be. The moment his lips touched my skin, my grip tightened, and his movements were deliberate, focused, unrushed, and endlessly skilled. I lifted my head and breathed through it as CLA lowered herself again. I looked down to see her hands take up where I had left off. His attention was unwavering as we moved together with a shared purpose, each movement building upon the previous one, sending waves through my legs that tightened. His rhythm grew more confident as I tenderly guided her. I was on the brink of losing my balance, but I was determined not to let him stop. He inhaled sharply, touched her, and encouraged her to stand. She allowed him to guide her into his lap, and his hand steadied her at the waist. I stepped back, brushing a hand along her spine as she settled above him. She closed her eyes and allowed gravity to take care of the rest. She shifted gradually, adjusting to each movement as his hands supported her, one at her back and the other at her pelvis. Her respiration became irregular. The subject's attention was fixed on him, and she leaned in, grasping his shoulders for support as her movements intensified. Her body tensed, and her head fell against him. Her back arched just enough to provide us with the information we required. She refrained from speaking, she did not need to. He held her for a brief period, then stood with her in his arms and carried her to the cushions, lowering her with care. He then turned to me, and I was already prepared to face away. My breath was already shallow when he stepped behind me and took hold, guiding us into a rhythm that was unquestionably established. His hands were certain, and his pace was steady but firm. CLA lay nearby, watching through half-closed eyes, still catching her breath. I smiled at her, but the pressure shifted and I gasped, grabbing the couch for balance. He knew where to go and how to keep me right on the edge. When he angled just right, my back arched, and everything inside surged forward, shaking me. I leaned forward, my eyes barely shut together. By the pace he kept steady. He didn't slow down, in fact, he was just getting started. He turned to CLA, gently lifting her once more and laying her flat. She barely had a second before he joined her, moving with even more urgency. I kneeled beside them, wiping the sweat from her brow and trailing light kisses along his shoulder and chest. Claire's hand searched for mine, and I held it tightly. She moved with him again, this time at a faster pace. Her body responded easily, and she rose to meet him. She gripped the cushions, and her breathing shifted. Her reaction grew stronger with each passing moment, and she continued to build. I watched her closely, amazed at how he remained focused and fierce, and how his stamina did not just impress but overwhelm. It felt as though he could continue indefinitely, and a part of me believed that he might. Finally, he let out a quiet breath against her neck as he reached his limit. I curled up beside them, brushing strands of hair from her forehead, my own body still buzzing. CLA lay completely still, chest heaving. I leaned closer and murmured with a grin, still thinking it was a bad idea. Like what you heard. There's plenty more heartbreak and secrets to come. Hit like, subscribe, and stay curious with Tangled Truths.